You are now entering the horror sanctum.
Hello and welcome back to the Horror Sanctum podcast. I'm Jay with Kellen and TJ, and I'm going to start this episode with a trivia question. Not for you guys, for everyone listening at home, because obviously we're live and I can hear them. So, what was the first horror movie to ever be nominated for a Best Picture Oscar? Got it yet? I think I hear Ian and Erica Shannon chiming in. It is The Exorcist indeed. Thanks, guys. They're the only people I know that listen to every episode, so I know I can name drop them and they'll catch that. But anyways, we're talking about 1973's The Exorcist, directed by William Friedkin, based on the novel of the same name. This was a movie also picked by today's guest. Please welcome actress and special effects artist, Miss Kaylie Guerrero. Kaylie, welcome to the Sanctum.
Thank you guys so much for having me. My name is Kaylie Mahoney Guerrero, and as it was said before, I do special effects and acting a little bit, so I'm really excited to jump into this podcast.
And we're happy to have you. So, like I said, you picked today's movie, which is The Exorcist. So let's go grab our Ouija boards and dive in.
And dive in we shall. This is 1973's The Exorcist, directed by William Friedkin, known to other film lovers as director of such films as The French Connection, some great films. This is kind of an outlier in his filmography. Didn't do a whole lot of horror stuff, but man, when he dove in hard. And it's based on a William Peter Blatty novel, as is the third Exorcist film is also based on a William Peter Blatty's novel. I believe it's called Legion. And William Peter Blatty actually directed that one, and I love the director's cut of that film as well. Exorcist 2 we don't speak of. It's kind of over there somewhere. If you want to have a good time, take some CBD gummies and just have an experience. There's always that. But the classic, the original Exorcist. This movie, I think, traumatized and well, literally did traumatize a whole generation of film goers, and they wouldn't show it on television for the longest time just because any edit of it was just not cool for people in the 70s. So when they did finally start showing it, it started traumatizing a whole new generation of the first generation's traumatized kids. So this is the movie that keeps on giving. It turned 50 years old 2 years ago, which is wild. I remember when they released the extended director's cut of it, where they just added just a little bit of CGI sweetening to some things, and I believe that was in 2000 they did that. And I think that is still my preferred version. I think it is just a little bit better. They sweeten up the things like the crawling backwards down the staircase, and some things just pull off just a little bit better in that version. So if you're going to watch it now in 2025, watch the extended director's cut. So backstory on me, I'm a third generation pastor's kid. So all things demons and exorcist was always like I believed it. I still on some level believe there's something to all this stuff. So I don't mess with Ouija boards and I don't mess with demons. That's kind of my two things. It's like if you want to do that, have at it in your home, not in my home. Um, you know,
I know what I'm getting you for Christmas this year.
I shouldn't have said anything. Anyway, Linda Hamilton, not Linda Hamilton. That's the girl from.
You're spinning off
Linda
from the
Blair.
last episode we recorded.
I'm still thinking about Terminator 2. We talked about Companion, our last episode. It's had some Terminator 2 vibes at times. So, not Linda Hamilton, who was great in Children of the Corn, but Linda Blair, the other Linda, was a great child actress. So sweet and innocent in this film until the devil comes in, and then it's like, whoa, all bets are off. Some of the better special effects makeup at that point in time, it wasn't hardly even an industry except for making rubber suits and stuff, and maybe a little bit of blood effects here and there. But this film, with like the head spinning all the way around, like the real mechanics of the effects that they did in this film really predated when it really got big in the 80s, and set the bar high for so many pretenders. I mean, to me, this is the definitive demonic exorcism movie, and forever will be. I can't imagine anything eclipsing it, because it literally had people making sermons against don't go see this movie, you'll be letting the devil in if you do. And of course that just made everybody want to go see the movie, and you just can't buy publicity like that. It was like the phenomenon that happened with the Blair Witch Project just 30 years before that happened. And you can't, in the world of the internet and everything now, you just can't uh, recreate that ever. This is a time in history. It is a classic film. It's directed so well. It's acted so well. Max von Sydow, who got famous in Ingmar Bergman films over in Sweden, making weird, you know, things about like the Seventh Seal and stuff about the Grim Reaper and the Black Death and stuff. He comes over and then is in some of the best horror films and psychological thrillers. He's in Needful Things as the devil, a Stephen King adaptation. Just such a great actor. Um, I'm not a huge fan of any of the sequels except for Exorcist 3, which I do love and has one of the best jump scares of all time. Um, but this film is just, it's in my DNA. But because it still creeps me out to this day, especially all the stuff with Reagan. Um, and like I said, this is one of the things that I suspend my belief, and I'm like, I think some of this stuff is real, and I don't mess with the things I think is real. Like, so I don't rewatch it a whole lot. Of the classic top tier horror films, it's not one I revisit a lot. I've probably seen it half a dozen times over my life. I have owned it in several iterations. I do now have the Blu-ray special edition. But man, I can't say there's any particular flaws to it. It's been parodied almost more than just about any horror film over the years. My favorite parody actually is with Linda Blair and Leslie Nielsen in 1990. They made a movie that was like a comedy sequel called Repossessed.
Repossession.
If you haven't seen that, that's a fun time. I remember watching that and thinking it was a legitimate sequel, and I was like, wow, this tone really changed. So that was a fun experience at the video store back in the day. But I'm curious, being a special effects artist and growing up loving horror, Kaylie, what does this movie mean to you, and how did it shape your love of horror?
Well, it actually totally segued my love for horror and me ending up in this industry overall. I actually watched this movie when I was way too young, and similar to you, I grew up in a Christian school and have a large background of faith in my family. And funny enough, I watched it in first grade and then went and told my Christian school friends that I had watched it, and their mothers were like, okay, you're not hanging out with that girl. um, but funny enough, when you had kind of mentioned your background and kind of how you believe in certain things and how it can kind of scare you, funny enough, the older I got and the more I watched the movie, the more I realized it's kind of a theological thriller in a sense, where it actually brought a lot of people closer to the faith out of fear of evil. And specifically, I actually dug into the background of this movie quite a bit, and I'll tell you why here in a moment. Um, but they actually uh, completely followed the exact methods that a Catholicism would use for a priest, and
Mhm.
want to make sure that everything was the most efficient and the most like they would do for a real exorcism. So I do give uh, William props for that, because I love that he made sure not to make fun of and had this type of respect for the religion that was at play. So love that. But funny enough, you had mentioned the practical effects that go into this movie and how it really shaped horror. And funny enough, I went to a school called the Vocational Academy of Makeup and Prosthetics, and that's where I learned to sculpt, mold, cast, do head to toe prosthetics, PTMs, all that good stuff. And the the most the most high tier person that we learned from is Dick Smith. His work segued everything else that was in our curriculum. The entire process of our schooling was all sought after Dick Smith. So his work in The Exorcist, it was such a full circle moment to go to that school and learn under that curriculum after this movie had inspired me to want to even become a special effects artist. There was so much practicality that went into that, and I think that's really important when talking about the horror aspect and how much it did mess up the audience. I know you probably remember there were people leaving an ambulance out of this movie when it first aired because it was just that good. And part of that I've learned as a practical effects artist is that there's a certain psychology to practicality where your mind can actually tell what's CG or practical, and that itself plays on the psyche a little bit when you watch the movie. So all the way down to the camera shots, they have these guys on these man-made rigs going up and down stairs to get these oneers of these scenes, to the mechanical Regan spinning her head around, to Dick Smith actually doing 4 to 5 test makeups on Regan to make sure it was perfect in all different lightings, all different angles. You get into the progression makeup over time where you're psychologically not even realizing, but with each day scene that goes on, they're putting little by little more makeup on Regan to really show this ultimate progression of the demon taking her over. So I don't want to nerd out too much and let everybody talk, but this movie has really shaped me, not only when I go to do film and the way I think about practicality and the kind of films that I want to be in and the opinions I give when it comes to film, but it definitely shaped me into the effects artist I am too.
Awesome.
Yeah, the special effects in this movie are so standout. And I was talking about nerding out. Like I go down rabbit holes. I'm a huge YouTube person. Combined, TJ and Jay have probably seen 1,000 hours more of horror than I've ever seen. Conversely, I've probably seen 1 million more hours of YouTube videos than anybody on this screen right now, because that's my jam. But I was going down a Google rabbit hole, and talking about the practical effects. Everybody remembers the pea soup in this movie, the pea soup scene that shoots out. It was actually a mixture of pea soup and porridge colored with food dye and cake dye. And then I don't know why this fascinated me, and then I ended up going down another rabbit hole, but the crew chose Anderson's brand pea soup over Campbell's because of its consistency. And if you want to buy a can of Anderson's brand pea soup, you can get one for $24.66 off Walmart right now. Also, the restaurant that inspired that pea soup closed last year in California.
Wait, a can of soup costs $25?
They don't make it anymore. So if you want
wow.
the real Exorcist experience, you're going to have to pay a premium. Speaking of a premium, Dick Smith's Do-It-Yourself Monster Makeup book. I looked that up because Kaylee mentioned that, and you can buy a copy for $234 on Amazon. So, yeah, I don't know why I went there, but that's what I did. The Exorcist
ADHD is a hell of a thing.
It is. I went full ADD. So 78% on Rotten Tomato, which is egregious. This is one of the most iconic films of all time. You can take horror out of the equation. This is one of the most iconic movies of all time. And what's interesting, and me and Jay were kind of talking about this before we started up, this movie is 2 hours and 2 minutes. It does not feel like a 2-hour film. Also, everything everybody remembers from this movie can be condensed into 25 minutes, which tells you how great of a movie that this is, that there's a whole hour and 40 minutes worth of movie to watch that people don't ever bring up. That's still a good film. I watched this movie when I was 16. I rented this at a movie store. That's my age, as well as The Omen in the same night. And I watched them back to back. I guess I didn't want to sleep for a week, but But I watched The Omen, and then I watched The Exorcist. Um, and I remember back then thinking this was such a good movie. And then I watched it today. I was like, why are they in Egypt? like, I completely forgot that part of the movie even existed. I was like, where, wait, what did I, and I was literally looking on my Amazon to make sure that I rented the right movie because I wanted to refresh myself on it. I was like, no, the guy looks familiar. like I know that guy's in the movie.
That's where they pick up Pazuzu, the demon.
Yeah. I didn't even,
That
I
guy,
don't mind.
that guy in the beginning is not actually old. That's actually all old age makeup that you see. He is not actually that old. He
Oh,
was
wow.
quite a young actor, and so is the priest. That the older priest, not Damie, but
Yeah. Max
Mhm.
von Sydow actually had been aged because he looks younger in 1990s Needful Things than he looks as the priest in 1973.
I can
Yep.
see how you can forget that, but that is literally one of probably my top 10 favorite movie openings of
Yeah.
all time. Like, it's so beautiful. And like, it's just that when you see Pazuzu, like all that initial fear that you saw watching it for the first time, kind of floods your system again. Like, I love that opening.
Yeah, and it just goes to show that it's a complete movie. It's not. This is not just a great horror film. It's a great movie. Like, they put time and energy into this. The practical effects. There's movies that have come out since that use practical effects that would not top this film. Like, you can tell they a lot of heart went into making this movie look the way that it did. Like, somebody had a vision and people were committed to making that vision come to life, and you can tell that in this movie, with the Linda Blair's makeup, the performance she gives. A lot of young actors, you see them, and sometimes they're kind of flat.
I believe, and
And
Kaylee probably knows, I believe she broke her back playing this role.
She did. She broke her back because the rig of the bed had her like where it could go from here to, and while doing that, she actually has had back problems her entire life.
wow.
Yeah.
It makes sense because she was fully committed to this role. In that scene where she's flopping back and forth, you can tell that that's not a dummy. That is a human person that's flopping back and forth. And just everything in the movie, and the main priest really sells everything because he is us, right? He's the skeptic. Even though this is his realm, it's not until he sees the supernatural stuff actually with his own eyes that he starts to believe that maybe this is a possession. You can see in his face when the bed starts to kind of move in the room. Because he's missed most of the stuff. He keeps showing up, and yeah, okay, she's doing voices, she's speaking backwards, but he's still skeptical. He's still like, no, I just don't. I don't think it's a possession. I think she needs psychiatric help. She needs to be in a mental hospital. But then when he starts to see it, you can see on his face that he's like, oh no, this is really happening. And that's the thing is, Linda Blair, Ellen Burstyn, she's phenomenal in everything I've seen her in. I forgot that she was in this, and then as soon as she popped up on the screen, I'm like, oh my god, forgot she was the mom. And then I had to go down her IMDb. Letters are hard. I had to go down hers and see all the stuff that she's been in because I know she'd been in stuff recently. And she's always delightful. That's what makes this movie great. Is a lot of times horror movies are kind of campy, or the acting's not quite there, or there's some characters where they threw them into a role because, well, you're going to die in 10 minutes anyway, so you don't have to be a great actor. Everybody in this movie is phenomenal. Like, it draws you in, and that's a mark of a great film, is when you start to care about these characters. When Reagan comes out and she tells the guy you're going to die and pees in the floor, one of the most iconic scenes in the movie, starts to set the tone of what's going to happen. It pulls you in. You started to care about this character because they did a good job in the beginning part of showing that the relationship she has with her mother, this playful young girl, and now all of a sudden she's obviously tormented. Talking about how great this movie is, the cover that's one of the most recognizable covers, movie posters in cinema history. The theme song for The Exorcist is one of the greatest in all of movie history. It's one that as soon as you start to hear the piano, you know exactly what movie it is. And I think that's just a testament to how special this movie is. From 1973, it still has that impact to today. So it's surprising we hadn't talked about this before. considering it is such an iconic film in the genre, and this whole podcast is dedicated to horror. So shame on us for not bringing it up sooner. But thank you, Kaylie, for having it as your selection. Great pick. Absolutely love this film. It was so good to go back and see it again after all these years. And still, I guess it'd been so long, I kind of forgot most of the stuff that happened outside of the main exorcism scene. But watching it again was just such a treat. So yeah, I really enjoyed this movie.
We're glad, because we didn't want to have to kick you off the show, but
Sometimes he surprises us.
Sometimes. I was just sitting here realizing this is my second Friedkin film this week because I watched Bug. I don't know.
That's a weird movie. I watched that.
I haven't seen it since
Ashley Judd
and Michael
Shannon.
who's
Yeah,
perfect and whatever. And
it makes your skin itch watching that movie.
It's a great movie, and also I think one of his better films is Sorcerer. I don't know if anyone else has seen Sorcerer,
which is a remake of a foreign film. I can't remember. The Wages of Fear, I think.
Maybe, but that's not Sorcerer, and I love Sorcerer. It's just like one long anxiety road trip, right? So,
right.
Kellen touched on most of my notes. Like, iconic is the word that comes to mind when you think of The Exorcist, right? Because like you said, the poster, and I had all this written down. The music, Tubular Bells, right? Like, it's iconic. There's scenes that are iconic. The poster, iconic. Quotes, iconic. Even my shirt is a play on the poster from The Burbs. It has Tom Hanks instead of the priest. Like, it's just so iconic. This was one of the movies. I still think I would have to credit Jaws, Critters, or Tremors as like the movies I've seen the most horror wise, but Exorcist is coming in pretty hot. It's also one of the movies I saw earlier on as a child because my mom hates this movie because it scared the crap out of her. Like, she would be one of the ones outside protesting, because I come from a Christian background as well. I was a first generation youth pastor, not a third generation preacher son like TJ, but
I was also briefly a youth pastor.
Good times.
Yeah.
I was not good at it. I gave them Mudvayne lyrics one time and like tried to make a lesson out of that. So anyways, I digress. So, you know, when you're a kid, your parents don't want you to watch something, you're naturally going to be drawn to it. So this is one of those movies I was drawn to. This and Rocky Horror Picture Show, because that was just so taboo at the time too. I'm like, I'm so drawn. I want to see it. And you know, both are God tier for me. Like, Exorcist is God tier, Rocky Horror is God tier. But my mom still won't watch this movie. And when it came out, it was probably terrifying. It's probably absolutely terrifying. Now it's not, right? Like, you know, unless you still have those deep Christian roots and that fear of God in you, like, it doesn't have that same kick that it did back then, you know, because we've seen so much at this point in our lives. We're so desensitized. So it doesn't have that scary kick to me anymore personally, but it doesn't downgrade the movie at all. Unlike you guys and everybody else in the world, I like every sequel and the TV series. Like, are they
You like
great?
The Heretic?
Is it great? No, but I still like it. Yeah, I like The Heretic because she's fantastic, and like, even though it's not a great movie, she's great. But has anyone else watched the television series with Gina Davis?
Mm-mm.
And John Cho is in the second season. It's great. It only lasted 2 seasons on Fox. I think it's on Hulu. I thought it was very enjoyable, and I think as far as like Rotten Tomatoes and other sites like that, I think the series has better ratings than most of the movie sequels, if not all of them. I know we've already done it. We're kind of going backwards, right? We did Exorcist Believer already.
Oh, don't remind
that
me.
one. But see,
So
but everybody
bad.
hated that one. But I'm like, you know, I can appreciate it for what it is. I'm excited. I think they just said
You appreciate it for being a terrible movie?
Yeah. Mike Flanagan's Exorcist comes out next year, I think. So, you know, I'm excited what he's going to do with it. But I didn't hate it. And it's just one of those things where the movie I gravitate the most with this saying is like, I'd rather have a bad Hellboy than no Hellboy. Like, Hellboy is one of my favorite characters. It's my favorite film series. And like, do we want a Guillermo del Toro, Ron Perlman sequel? Yeah, we want hundreds of them because they were wonderful. But if we can't have that, do you not want just something else to fill that void you have? Like David Harbour's Hellboy. I enjoyed that one. They just tried to cram too much into one movie. There were too many new characters. This new one I didn't care for. It's my least favorite, but it's one of the most, it's more praised than the previous because it's more comic accurate. My point is, with that long drawn out thing, is like I'd rather have something I can watch again for the first time, or a show or a comic or something that I can still fill that void where I'm missing from the original Exorcist. And I've always been that way. I'm one of the few people that in my life that feels that way.
I have a more Marlon Brando take. Look what you did to my boy.
Right.
Oh, bitch. Why would we let you talk? But anyways, all that was just saying, keep making the sequels. I'll keep watching. Like you posted today, TJ, about the I Know What You Did Last Summer remake. I'm like, bring it. Like, why not? Sure.
I'll watch it.
Yeah, the series. I didn't like the series. But I'll take a remake. I'll take another sequel. Like, just feed me more, the time, like we talked about before we started recording, Kellen mentioned, like I watched it and I'm like, he's about to jump out the window. What? It's only been on for like an hour. No, it's almost done. Like it just flies by somehow. And every time, like it's not like I've watched it before and felt like it was a drag. Like every time I watch it, I'm like, that's like $130 tops, right? No, 202. So has anyone else seen Friedkin's he did a documentary, the Devil and Father Amorth. So he goes, I forget which country. So he goes to a live exorcism with a film crew and records this exorcism. It's terrifying. I think it's on Hulu, because ever since he made The Exorcist, he kind of had this obsession with this stuff. So he had heard this story. Someone had emailed him this information. So he goes to this country. This woman's possessed. Like you see her. I mean, and some of it, I don't believe anything anymore. That's just how I am. But like some of it, I'm like, I don't know, man. Like maybe you shouldn't watch it, TJ, if you want to go to sleep. But it's on Hulu, I believe. But it's The Devil and Father Amorth, Amorth. Well worth a watch. Anyway,
Just say, I think it's adorable that you keep asking, have y'all seen? I know in my heart you're not including me, but just the fact that you're not excluding me makes me warm inside. That because I've not seen anything that you've mentioned in the last 2 episodes.
I know.
Nothing. You're just saying words that you could be speaking in hieroglyphics right now. I wouldn't have any idea what you're talking about.
Speaking of which, has anybody else seen that? Like, yeah, I know. I'm not talking to you. And even if Kaylee wasn't here, I'd be like, TJ, have you seen that one? I wouldn't even address you if
Right.
that was the question. But
it's more the universal you.
It's being polite.
I like the Dominion movie too. I don't
That
know if y'all have seen that one.
That one was okay.
Spoilers.
I didn't like the beginning.
Yeah. But anyways, I enjoyed the entire franchise, but obviously this movie, I think we all hate it. But it's a God tier movie. It's a movie everybody's seen. It's a movie everybody knows. You recognize it, even if you've never seen it. So that's all I have. We'll do any last thoughts, and then we'll do our rankings. Kaylee, we do a ranking system out of 5. So whatever you would give this movie, you would just say 4 out of 5, 3 out of 5, 0 out of 5, whatever you want to do. So we'll go around and do that. We'll start with you, TJ.
God, I've had an eyelash in my eye for the last 10 minutes. Yes. I mean, this is, as you say, it's God tier. It's not one that I revisit except maybe every 5-6 years, something like that, because I think that it's because it's so seared into my DNA and my brain. It's like I don't have to revisit it as much because, I have to be in a certain frame of mind and mode to kind of want to watch it, because it does still creep me out. It's one of the handful of films that still creeps me out. It doesn't have quite the same punch as like when I was younger and was like really into a lot of the stuff, but it still has that residual memory or something. I don't know, but it's God tier. It's one of the few things I'll give a 5 to.
Nice. I wasn't expecting a 5. All right, Kaylee.
Okay, so for multiple reasons, I also agree with TJ that this is a God tier movie. I think that it really sets the precedent for how hard you can go on a movie set. I just want to drop a fun fact before we get off here. But for instance, I know that you guys remember that scene where multiple scenes where they're breathing that cold air out, and they actually had to refrigerate the room, and they were having too many problems with the humidity, and that room ended up being like 20 below zero. Okay. And that is how much dedication the actors, the crew, the effects people were willing to put into this movie, that they were literally in snow snoots behind the scenes recording, the rigs that went into it, the practical effects, the machinery, the technicality, the there are so many good film components that I believe if we even just use half of these today, we could be making movies that really wow an audience like this. Again, for me, The Exorcist sets the standard, sets the film equation in my head for my future of being a director one day. And I have to give this movie the top rating, 5 out of 5. Like, love it so much.
Pressure's on, Kellen.
Oh no. um, I looked it up while Kaylee was talking. $12 million was the budget for this film, and they just made Snow White for 200 million. So how far we've come, and they milked every bit of that $12 million, and it was worth every cent that they spent on it. I don't think with a bigger budget they could have made a better movie. They might have had maybe some better effects if it was newer, but for the time and what they had. I mean, this is Jaws level as well as far as performance, pacing, everything just works. And the practical effects are amazing. Just the dresser moving, the doors shutting, just all the little things that we equate with terror now. You know, like you still see TikTok videos today or Instagram reels where somebody's in a room. That I saw one the other day, and it was a real estate agent. She was in an older house, and the door swings open behind her. Just that's a terrifying thing. Like people talk about clowns in the woods a couple of years ago. That was, if you're in a house by yourself and you hear footsteps, that's more terrifying than if you looked up and saw somebody. Like the unknown is always going to be more terrifying, and that's where this movie lives, in the unknown, because possessions, you can't see what's really behind the scenes. So for that and all those reasons, also I apologize, I am a harder rating than everybody else. Still agree with everybody else, it's a god tier film, so I'm gonna give it a 4.5. The only thing that keeps it from being a 5 for me is the rewatchability. For me, it's just not one that I would go back to. Like TJ said, I don't go back to this one often. Obviously, I've seen it twice in 24 years. But both times I watched it, it's phenomenal. It has its place in the Mount Rushmore of horror films. And if you like horror and you haven't seen this movie, then boo to you, because I've seen it. I have not seen anything. So yeah, 4.5.
Oh yeah, I didn't. That's why I didn't even do a synopsis. I'm like, if you haven't seen this or know about it, what are you doing with your life? I'm gonna do one more quick. Have you seen? And Kellen, this one you might have seen. I might have even sent it to you. So you're talking about ghosts and doors slamming and things. Have anyone seen? There's a video on Instagram, and it's like if you could see ghosts. And it's like he's just sitting there with the door just like opening and shutting it, like how unterrifying it is, because he's just like. And then he's like at the bed, he just like lifts the pillow up with his hand. Like it's just so boring. Like if you could actually see, like if they're going to haunt us, why is that what they're going to do? Just like door, okay. But if you saw, it's not scary. You got to think about it that way, you know.
Well, the thing I'm thinking about is something just entered the room that I can't see. Like I don't care if he's just sitting there going back and forth with the door. The fact that I can't see that happening is the terrifying part. Again, living in the unknown, kind of like living in 2025. Who knows what fresh hell awaits us tomorrow?
Right.
So true, right? So I gave this a 4.5.
Really? That is a shock.
I know. And I'm sitting here thinking about it. But I think I'm going to stick with it. I don't know why, though.
Do explain, though. You can't just drop it and say, I don't know why. Explain yourself, man.
I don't know. It may be just because it's lost that edge for me over the years. But obviously it's got, like we all said, it's God tier. Like it's Mount Rushmore. It's got to be seen.
So you like Halloween more than this, which you gave 5.
I do.
I do too. It's like my favorite.
But it may be that rewatchability, because Halloween, I think we all probably watch that every year.
Yeah,
every year. Yeah. But I also gave The Faculty and Shopping Mall 5. So what is life, right?
Right.
But I don't know. I thought about it all day today. Like honestly, I was like, this is a 5. I even contemplated maybe not watching it again because I've seen it so many times. I'm like, no, I'm going to go ahead and watch it. I'm like, that opening scenes, like I said, is one of my favorite opening scenes in a film. The acting, everything's perfect. The pacing is perfect. But for some reason, it's like a 4.9, so I give it a 4.5 because that's what I originally got. I went and found my original review I had done, and it was a 4.5. I'm like,
Do you think if not for me, would you have given to peer pressure and just went with a 5?
we'll
Since you
never
went
know.
after me,
We'll never know. But I think overall we're just going to give it a 5. Right? I think that's fair, and
Well, it would
it is
round
pretty
up.
close to perfect.
Yeah.
I think I gave it's just like Silence of the Lambs. Like I gave Silence of the Lambs a 4.5 too. Also, like it's still a perfect movie, but it's just not. I don't know. There's just something lacking for me. So, all right, The Exorcist, 5 out of 5, regardless of what some of us said. So that's gonna be it for this episode. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, to wherever you're listening to this podcast. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and we have an Apple Music playlist, Amazon Music playlist. Sorry. So I update that every week. Tubular Bells has been placed on it
Your
promptly.
CBD gum is starting to kick in.
It is starting to kick in, so we're wrapping it up. But Kaylie, thank you again so much for joining us today. You picked a great film. It's a film I've been wanting to rewatch anyways. So thank you again. Take a moment, tell everybody where they can find you, any upcoming projects. I know TJ had something he wanted to squeal about earlier.
Well, again, thank you guys for having me. I love any reason to nerd out about horror film. Those of you who met me at FrankenCon know that because I never shut up about it. You can find me on Instagram at kaylee.m.guerrero or on X, Guerrero Kaylee. And both of those accounts has my link tree, which will lead you to my TikTok, my email, all that fun stuff. Full circle moment. I was in an Exorcist film this year. If you follow my socials, I'll be able to let you guys know when that comes out and give you guys more information on that whole situation, those of you watching. And I also have a pretty fun collaboration coming up with TJ. So I'll let you speak a little.
Our we can't say a whole lot about it. We've got signed NDAs and whatnot, and we don't want somebody to beat us to the punch on making a movie like this. But our buddy Bradley Fowler has brought us in as producers on a film that hopefully by the end of this year we'll be producing. I think it's got a great package together, great talent attached, and we're looking forward to making a really good, memorable movie.
Great team.
Right.
Venmo us some money and we'll tell you what it's about. I have no idea what it's about. So anyways, again, thank you so much. It was a lot of fun. Come back anytime you want. Talk about whichever movies you want to talk about. We'll be happy to have you. So signing off, I'm Jay with Kaylie, Kellen, and TJ. And until next time,
keep it spooky.